Hi, I'm Becca with Free Tours by Foot. I'm here in Washington, D.C., and we're doing a virtual tour of the Tidal Basin. So before I start, I want to make sure that you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. We have virtual tours all over the United States and Europe, and we have a lot of great travel videos as well. So you definitely don't want to miss a single video, so be sure to subscribe. If you have any questions over the course of the tour, be sure to drop them in the comments. We're not doing this live, but I promise if you leave a question or comment, we'll respond to it as soon as we can. So on the Tidal Basin, which we're going to see the actual basin in a few minutes, and I'll tell you more about that when we get there, there are 3 memorials honoring 3 individuals who've helped to shape and lead this country during challenging times in American history. And our tour begins with the most contemporary figure on the Tidal Basin, Martin Luther King Jr. This is the newest memorial along the Tidal Basin. It was dedicated 2011, so actually 9 years from when we're recording this, 9 years ago this month. This is the only memorial on the National Mall to honor an African American, and it's one of just a handful of national memorials in DC that honor non-presidents. Now, as we first approach the memorial, the design might be a little puzzling, but the design is inspired by King's most famous speech. I'm referencing, of course, his I Have a Dream speech. He delivered that speech August 28, 1963, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. In that speech, King said, "From a mountain of despair comes a stone of hope." And that is the line that has inspired this memorial's design. What we see at the entryway is the mountain of despair. And of course, King is speaking very metaphorically. In 1963, he's talking about 200 years of American history, slavery, segregation, discrimination, prejudice, built into this towering mountain. But it's ultimately an optimistic message. It says, out of all of this, all you need is the stone of hope. And you can see pushed forward with great effort, a stone of hope has been removed from this memorial. And spoilers, as we come around, you will see that King himself is carved onto the front of the stone of hope. The carving of King starts out very detailed. You're going to certainly recognize him. He looks like all of his photographs. His arms are folded, but in one hand, you're going to see that he's holding a piece of paper. This represents the many speeches, many sermons, many letters and writings that King would construct during his time. So the way that he used words to change hearts and minds. But as you continue down, you're going to notice that the carving gets a little less detailed and it's actually left unfinished. The unfinished carving is a reminder that in 1968, at the young age of 39, King's life and work end with his assassination in Tennessee. So the unfinished life, the unfinished dream, the unfinished carving. Now, when you step into the memorial through the Mountain of Despair, you also notice the memorial opens up into 2 long curved walls. There are 16 quotations inscribed inside of this memorial. These quotations come from the entire depth and breadth of King's life and career. So these quotations cover a great span of issues that he worked on in his lifetime. Certainly you see civil rights well represented here, but also his fight for global justice, his concern for what was happening around the world. You'll see quotes that deal with the war on poverty, caring for those who he feared were being left behind in society. You'll see quotes that deal with nonviolent protests, pacifism. There's even a quote where King speaks in opposition to America's involvement in Vietnam. So my favorite part of the memorial is actually the quotes, because it really gives us a look into the work of King during his lifetime. So as you enter into the King Memorial, you'll actually see the Tidal Basin itself. The Tidal Basin is this body of water. It's man-made by the Army Corps of Engineers, completed in the first part of the 20th century. It is 10 feet deep, it covers 100 acres, and every day 250 million gallons of Potomac River water flow through this basin. The Potomac River is tidal at this point, so the water flows in with the tides. So this is Potomac River water. You will see people sometimes fishing in the basin, and in the summer, you'll see people out in paddle boats enjoying the view. What really makes the Tidal Basin famous isn't the memorials that are placed here, and it isn't the basin itself. It's what's planted all the way around the basin. These are our famous Japanese cherry blossom trees. In 1912, Japan gifted us 3,000 trees as a show of friendship between our 2 countries. First Lady Helen Nellie Taft advocated for a majority of the trees to be planted along the basin. At that time, there was just a driving path here and no memorials and nothing else. So she wanted to turn this into a beautiful public park. She said every spring when the trees blossomed, it would be a beautiful sea of cherry around the tidal basin. And that's what happens late March, early April. Beautiful pink and white blossoms all the way around. If you want to see some video of the Japanese cherry blossoms in bloom, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. We have some really great video footage. It's fall right now, and I gotta be honest, I love fall around the basin too, because the cherry blossoms start to turn that really beautiful orangey red. So in a couple of weeks, this is gonna be perfect fall foliage. Now there's only about 100 of the original trees still standing, but today we have about over 2,000 trees, about 2,200 cherry blossom trees just around the tidal basin alone, all of which descend from that original gift and from a second gift in the 1960s. From here, we're getting a glimpse of the memorial to Thomas Jefferson. This was the first memorial to be dedicated along the tidal basin, but as you can probably guess, we can't walk straight there because of the water, so we're gonna walk around. We're gonna use a little magic to make our way over there. So as you leave the memorial to Martin Luther King Jr. and walk along the tidal basin, the next stop is the memorial to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. This memorial is going to look a little different from other presidential memorials. If you watch any of our videos of the National Mall, you know we have memorials to presidents like Lincoln and Washington, and they're these big marble buildings. But when you look at this memorial to FDR, it's not a big marble building. Instead, it's a more immersive park environment. This memorial was dedicated in 1997, and it's a bit more of a contemporary look at reflecting on a president. Roosevelt is also very unique. He's the longest serving president in American history, president from 1933 all the way to 1945. So he's actually elected to 4 terms of office, though he dies 5 weeks into his 4th term. So this memorial is a reflection not just of Roosevelt the individual, but what was happening in the country during those 12 years. Because those 12 years are 12 really big years in American history. The Great Depression, the New Deal, and the Second World War. Now, before you enter the memorial, there's actually a prologue to the memorial. This is a glimpse of Roosevelt before he's president, and again, this is unusual. We don't often see in our presidential memorials the president before they occupy the White House. But what we see here is Roosevelt just after one of the defining moments of his lifetime. Roosevelt in adulthood is going to contract polio, a debilitating disease. He will survive, but he'll be unable to walk unassisted for the rest of his life, relying primarily on a wheelchair or propping himself up in metal braces. Now, this happens before Roosevelt is governor of New York and before he's president of the United States. So what we see here is a younger Roosevelt as his life has taken this turn. My favorite part of the prologue is this quote on the back wall. This quote comes from his wife and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, talking about how this illness, his bout with polio, really changes Roosevelt. It gives him strength and courage that he didn't have before. It's going to make him a more patient person, a more persistent person, and that's going to serve him well leading the country during 12 very challenging years. Now, one thing to be sure to notice, not just here but throughout the rest of the memorial, is you'll notice there's actually Braille here. This memorial is designed to be as accessible as possible to visitors. So the entire memorial was designed to be wheelchair accessible, which makes sense for Roosevelt, but also to be accessible to visitors who might be visually impaired as well. So you'll see Braille elements as well as other tactile elements in the memorial. As you enter the memorial is laid out into 4 open-air rooms. They might not look like a room in a house that you're expecting, but they're sort of 4 quadrants. Each room, each outdoor space represents one of Roosevelt's terms. So as we enter, you'll see the first term denoted, and each room sort of reflects what was happening in this term. So the first room really looks at what's happening in the country when Roosevelt is elected. This is a time where the nation is at the depths of the Great Depression. People are anxious and worried. Roosevelt, in his first inaugural address, says, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." He then promises the country that he will pledge himself, he will pledge the country to a new deal for the American people. So we see the promise of Roosevelt in this first room, the optimism that he inspires in the American people. I'll go ahead and just note that normally you would see water features throughout this memorial. Unfortunately, there was some very rainy weather about a year ago and some flooding, and so the water features are currently off, and I would expect that if you're planning to visit anytime in the immediate future. So as we enter into the second room, you're going to start to see figures of people that aren't Roosevelt. You're going to see the American people, everyday citizens. In the second term, we really see the Great Depression as it impacted everyday Americans. You'll see a man here huddled by the radio. Roosevelt was exceptionally savvy when it came to new media. He utilized his radio addresses, his famous fireside chats, to talk directly to the American people, to share information with them, talk about his policies and his plans. The American people felt like they really knew Roosevelt. He was coming into their homes, and that's one explanation for why he becomes our most elected president. Also in the second term, you'll see these men standing here in a bread line. You'll see the impacts of the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression on America's farmers. So I love this memorial because the sculpture really helps to tell the story. In a continuation of the second term, you're going to see these industrial rollers matching up to the panels here on the wall, showing America at work through the New Deal. The New Deal was a series of economic and social programs designed to get Americans back to work. It's a great tactile element, really fun for when children and students visit. There's also usually a great water feature here, a reference to the Civilian Conservation Corps, putting Americans to work doing conservation projects across the United States. So as we enter into the third term, we enter into America's entry into the Second World War. The United States is initially isolationist at the beginning of World War II, holding off and engaging fully in the war, although we do lend support, as Roosevelt's quoted here, as the great arsenal of democracy. One of my favorite quotes in the FDR Memorial is here: "I have seen war." Roosevelt had served as Undersecretary of the Navy during World War I. He had seen the devastation of the Great War, and that certainly influenced some of the hesitancy that he and other veterans of the Great War felt in engaging the American forces in this war. Of course, if you look around, you can see the rubble here. You can interpret this a few different ways. You can think about the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which overnight is going to change America's attitude about entering the war. It might make you think, too, of the bombings and brigades, the bombings of London and other cities. But we sort of see here the "I hate war" resolve crumbling away. And then, of course, in the third term, we get to see Roosevelt as President of the United States. We see Roosevelt seated in a chair. Notice it's not explicit that he's in a wheelchair. He's seated, but we can't really tell what kind of chair he's in. It's why the prologue is so important, because we can really see him as he was, a man who relied on that wheelchair for assistance. You can also see he's aged closer to his actual age as opposed to the prologue, the age that he is as we enter World War II. And of course, in this presidential memorial, you might expect we're in the World War II section. Maybe there would be a member of his cabinet or a World War II general here, but there's not. This is his Scottish Terrier, Fala. Fala was a gift from his cousin. Fala was exceptionally popular. Thousands of letters were written every week to the White House to the dog. Roosevelt had to hire a secretary to handle all of Fala's fan mail and Fala's press engagements. Fala was actually a nickname. The dog's full name is Murray the Outlaw of Fala Hill, which is a very long name for a dog, so it's Fala for short. And as you can probably see, everybody rubs Fala's ears for good luck. So in the fourth and final room, Roosevelt's legacy is represented. Again, Roosevelt only lives 5 weeks into his final term. He's going to die just shy of victory in Europe on May 8th, 1984. So just a couple weeks shy of that. So in this room, we see quotations spanning Roosevelt's entire presidency. We see the impact of his legacy. There's a timeline of his life. And of course, we see the mourning surrounding Roosevelt's death. Roosevelt, for many Americans, represented getting out of the Depression. He represented kind of a new deal, new time for the American people. So I love this representation of everyday Americans mourning the loss of FDR. And then finally, in this memorial, this is the only presidential memorial to include a statue of a First Lady. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt is included in this memorial. She's going to outlive FDR by more than 20 years. She was our first modern First Lady. She was really actively engaged as First Lady, having political causes. She traveled all around the country. FDR considered her his eyes and ears because of her ease of travel. She wrote a daily newspaper column that was syndicated across the country. She made radio addresses. She did public events. So she was really a woman of the people and out with the people. Following World War II, she would become the first delegate from the United States to the newly formed United Nations, and she plays a key role in helping the United Nations form its humanitarian efforts. So as we continue our virtual tour, we're walking along the Tidal Basin. There are walkways all the way around. This is absolutely something we recommend to do if you visit Washington, D.C. This is my favorite place to come down and walk. It's beautiful no matter what season it is, but we're making our way over to the Jefferson Memorial, so we're a little more than halfway there. So our final stop along the Tidal Basin is the Memorial to Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson's our 1, 2, 3 president. He's the first Secretary of State, second Vice President, and third president. This memorial was dedicated in 1943 on the 200th anniversary of Jefferson's birth. It's designed to look as though Jefferson himself was the architect. Jefferson was a Renaissance man. He played the violin. He spoke several languages. He was an avid reader, a farmer, founded a college, all kinds of great stuff. And he was also an architect. So this was designed by a man named John Russell Pope. His buildings are pretty prolific in Washington, D.C. He also designed the National Archives, National Gallery of Art, and many buildings along Embassy Row. Now, you're looking at this and probably going, hey, this is not so neoclassical. I was expecting something a little more impressive. The scaffolding hurts a little bit here. The scaffolding is part of a restoration to this memorial. This marble is 80 years old, and they were having trouble with what I call a slime, but I think what science actually calls a biofilm. And this black biofilm was attaching itself to the marble. They've been using a laser removal technique to clean and repair this marble, and then while they've been up there, fixing parts of this memorial that need repair. So hopefully in a few months, we're gonna start to see this last bit of scaffolding coming down. But the good news is we can still go inside. So inside of the Jefferson Memorial, you're going to see a 19-foot tall statue of Jefferson made out of bronze. He's surrounded by excerpts of 4 of his most important writings, including, of course, the Declaration of Independence, the work that Jefferson is probably most famous for today. Now, if you were to make your way around this statue, you might notice some symbols on the back of the Jefferson statue. You'll see wheat and tobacco representing his love of farming and agriculture, and you'll see a stack of books representing his love of education. Jefferson helps to found the Library of Congress, and he saves the library after it's burned in August of 1814 by selling his collection of 6,487 books to Congress. He also founds what is today the University of Virginia. One really cool thing about visiting the Jefferson Memorial is if you look straight ahead from the Jefferson Memorial, you get a clear shot through the trees of the White House. Jefferson is the first president to live a full term of office in the White House. He's also the first president to have pets at the White House. He didn't have a cat or a dog. Jefferson, for a short period, actually had 2 bear cubs as his pet. But you're getting a beautiful view of the south side of the White House and, of course, a gorgeous view of the Washington Monument. Thank you so much for joining me today on this virtual tour of the Tidal Basin. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and make sure to leave a comment below. Let us know what you liked best or what you want to hear more about. We have a lot of great virtual tours and videos on our channel, so be sure to check them out. And if you know someone coming to Washington, D.C., be sure to share this video with them. We are offering tours in a lot of our cities, so be sure to visit our website. And we hope that we'll see you on a tour in D.C. soon. Thanks so much.